I really want to say glorp right now. Welcome to my oh, maybe I should blur that. Well, it doesn't really matter. I'll make a little picture image existing to my goat Sung Chin Woo. We'll hide this right here. Welcome back. It's been a long time. And honestly, new year, new me. New year, new me. We're not gonna be only playing video games on this stream. We're going to be studying for my classes. But you guys can talk to me. I don't mind. Two, I'm a software engineer. We, as a community, we should know that I'm a software engineer. Let's start 2026 with a bang and do our work. I want to encourage not just you, but me. Oh, no. I'm saying that wrong. I want to encourage. I don't want to just encourage me with working. I also want to encourage you. So maybe I should that's why I made the layout like this. It looks smaller, so the content is as. Maybe I'll make it smaller. Like this, and then I'll make. Undo. Yeah, I'm gonna make the content smaller, so focus more on. Maybe I'll make me bigger. Am I big enough? Said that was good enough. Talking about did it. My bad. So the first 5 minutes, let's fix whatever is going on. Okay, so my audio is pretty good. Study with me, Econ Edition. All right, and we're good. As you can see, I cut my hair from last time. I just took a shower, so it's pretty flat, which is good, honestly, because I'd be looking like Sasuke on my days off. All right. I cut this myself too, so maybe. Alright, what the heck? Let's move this here. Are your smart choices smart at all? From macro or micro to macro. Let's start. I have background music on. I don't know if it's too loud.
This unit begins our study of macroeconomics. The starting point is the connection between microeconomics and macroeconomics.
So I took microeconomics like 3 semesters ago, but we all should learn about GDP. I want everybody here, everybody who's watching this, to learn about more than just about video games, because we love Genshin Impact here, but we love Genshin Impact here, but we love Valorant, but we need our balance. We need some happiness. We need some sadness to our happiness. I'm not saying this is sadness. All right. So this is chapter 5, from micro to macro. So why am I taking this course? a couple reasons to why I'm actually taking this course.
by an invisible hand to promote
So it's pretty difficult to talk over this guy, but I'm gonna just do it anyways. I wanted to take this course for a couple of reasons. One, it's fully online, so I could stay home. I could focus on what I want to focus on, not just streaming, but also getting a job in my field. So macro is the whole picture, but micro is just specific countries.
say a few words about each of these historical events to provide some context for what we're going to learn. In 2020, the COVID pandemic triggered public lockdowns, which dramatically reduced economic activity and employment. Massive government spending programs were reversed the downturn. But the extra demand from that spending
But the extra demand from that spending. Let me turn on my voice actor voice because I'm a future Genshin Impact voice actor and I want them to have some pre-acknowledgments of how I want it. By rising house prices in the United States seemingly without an end, and because businesses and individuals thought that investing were basically risk-free. Okay. He's speaking a little too bad.
eventually the ever rising prices of real estate as a bubble.
So right now he's talking about how real estate, although is a stability zone, a stable asset has become such an expensive asset. I don't know what this is, but like it's like I got this from like a tube. It was like plug in a tube. It's actually pretty nice hand massage. So we're talking about history, like the crisis, the financial crises, and the Great Depression. I'm assuming this guy's just reconciling micro to macro.
One other important aspect of the Great Depression, which has modern relevance, is that the government made many mistakes. The government allowed banks to fail during the Great Depression, which prolonged the downturn. Another thing that happened is that revenues fell for the government, causing government budgets to go into deficit. In an attempt to reverse the deficit, governments raised taxes, which only made the downturn even worse. A similar thing happened.
Yo, who's with me? The government
In countries like Greece and Portugal,
is kind of corrupt right now. Hold on.
because of those deficits, they cut back on spending through austerity programs, which made recessions even worse. Back to the Great Depression.
Where's the soundboard? The government is kind of corrupt. No, I just think their choices are much more like we're supposed to trust our government choices, but I do think we should, as a community, be able to, well, as a democratic community, be able to put more input than just these politicians who want to make money. This is a big one. This is a definition. Whenever there is definition, I feel like it's always important to write it. Macroeconomic. Okay. I don't know how to stream my other screen. So I'm just gonna. I could just show you. I'll show you at the end. I'll show you my notes. But what I like to do is I like to write the definition. Macroeconomics analyzes the performance, focuses on the performance of the whole Canadian economic. I'm in Canada, so it's probably gonna economy and global economy, the whole economy and global economy, the combined outcomes of all individual microeconomic choices. So it's just the focus on the performance of the global economy from the combined outcomes of all individual microeconomic choices. So if you don't know what microeconomics is, in microeconomics we focus more on specific, like let's just say businesses. We look at industries and businesses and how, I don't know, this term is used a lot, supply and demand correlate with each other. I'm assuming in macroeconomics, we're not just looking at specific businesses like the housing market or the like the haircutting business, right? Or gas stations. Gas stations is a big one. We're looking at the whole global thingy and how the government manages that.
in the context of a larger interpersonal economy, the combination of all of those individual choices within a country and across countries. To remind you, going back to micro, we looked at those three individual choices, not in context.
I'm so I took this 2 3 semesters ago and I almost got it. I didn't talk about how it interacts with the market. I did talk about how individuals in households, businesses, and governments make. I kinda did. With 50-50, I'll take it. Winning the 50-50 against you. No, that's a pre-Colombina. Anyways,
It's important to try and understand what happens when all these individual choices are combined in a macro context. We need to use a new concept, and that concept is called the fallacy of composition.
so the fallacy of composition. What is true for one is not true for all. The whole is greater than the sum of the individual parts. What? No shit. Fallacy of composition. What is true for one is not true for all. The whole is greater. I usually like to put it in my own words, but this is just a fact.
What is
And
true for one is not true for all. Another phrase I'm sure you
I have, honestly, I might go into the ASMR industry. And what I have, when I got this keyboard, I got sample keycaps and like uh, yeah, it doesn't sound that good, but like I would destroy the industry. That's why I'm not in the industry, because I'd be so good at it. I'd make all the money and like there'd be no viewers left, so that's kind of why I'm kind of like, all right, so having a soundboard would actually be pretty funny. All right. Why is he spamming definitions? Paradox of thrift. Attempting to increase savings cause total savings to decrease because of the falling employment and income. The paradox of thrift. Attempting to increase savings cause total saving. Oh, in terms of governments, that makes sense. But in terms of like self, that doesn't make sense. I mean, well, like bigger compositions. I don't remember how micro went. I'm not too sure if it was just a bunch of definitions.
Let me tell you that story. If as an individual you decide to save more and you put money in your savings account, you save, but the economy as a whole doesn't really change. If all individuals in the economy start saving more, then that means people aren't buying.
I'm so tough.
Falling sales.
That's how a recession happens. If everybody starts saving their money, we are all cooked as a society. No, not a society. Our economy is cooked. Since since if y'all been on TikTok, everybody is making these like very cheap meals, like apple pie. They just like put applesauce, like cheap other stuff, and they're like, "Oh, this is kind of fire. This is kind of good." Um, Yo, I'm getting scammed. I think I just have to wait. Buggy system. Anyways, is it still falling? I think it's because I clicked the space bar instead of something else. This is a pretty buggy website. Anyways, do you guys like the background? It's not my wallpaper right now. Maybe I should make my wallpaper the background. I don't know if I still have it on my computer though. Let's check. Wallpaper. During the glow. I didn't know it was gonna quiz me. uh, okay, that's fine. During the global financial crisis of 2008 2009, all these indicators fell except, I think it was housing prices. Next. Housing prices. Okay, oh wait, I didn't read unemployment. Yeah, because there's a financial crisis. Well, yeah, that makes sense. When everyone saves their money, total savings decrease. This is an example of the paradox of thrift.
Spending and GDP decrease, income decreases, so people can't save as much as they hoped.
It's a little satisfying when you get all the questions right because, like, I don't know, it shows you're a genius. I'm kidding. It's just like it is satisfying though, but I wouldn't say I'm a genius. I'm just like I'm kind of cheesing it. So, in a real situation, people should save when the GDP is high. When you don't want to save, but you should no, you shouldn't spend when everybody's trying to save because that's when everything's expensive.
To learn macroeconomics, just like in microeconomics, we're going to use models. The map you see here is an example of a model. If you want to solve a problem, for example, how do you drive across Canada? One of the things we could do is to gather as much information about Canada, what's the most information about
Let me
population,
try to find this.
or we could use a map. A map is a model, and then it only contains the information that's important for you to solve your problem.
Okay, circular.
And it leaves out everything. It's a simplified representation
So
of the
when Genshin's
column.
Luna
If
4
you want
comes
to know
out,
what's most important
I
about
want to
Canada,
stream either
remember really
Wednesday or
simple
Thursday
numbers.
because I think it comes out Tuesday. And on
If you want to know
Tuesdays, I have
your problem,
school and like
what do?
I'm there the whole day.
The circular
Kind
flow
of
method
sucks,
is used
but
for understanding
um,
when does the invisible
I
line
can't play
matter
during
and
release.
when does it not.
I have like back
Simple
to back
math.
school days.
In Figure 5.1, we're going to take a look at the circular flow of economic life. This circular flow of economic life is
Um,
the same as Figure 1.5. Only difference in macro is that we're going to emphasize some connections between input markets and output markets. Let's first review the simple circular flow from Figure 1.5. Individual households economics are presumed to own all the inputs or the resources of the economy: labor, land, capital, natural
let me
resources.
speak after
Households have
this
all
lady
those inputs
talks.
to businesses,
I
and businesses
recall
input
this
markets.
lady whenever she
Businesses
talks,
provide money
it's
and something has
important.
to pay for those inputs. The businesses pay for those inputs by giving the
I want
households
a
services
snack.
that the households use as earned income. The businesses take the inputs and use them to produce products and services which they sell in output markets to households. Households have the money that they earned in input markets and income to buy those products and services. At the end of the circle, households have the products and services they need to survive, and businesses have the money. And we're ready for the circle to start over again. The government
We
plays a
are
central
ready.
role in setting the rules of the game, and a macroeconomic is going to play a very important role using fiscal policy and monetary policy to try and influence
Fiscal
worldwide economic conditions.
policy and government.
both in output markets and in input markets.
Part two.
Let's take an
I think these are all around like 6 to 8 minutes.
purchase inputs from households on the right-hand side of the circular flow diagram, and households have income. The businesses have used the inputs to produce products and services. But what if the households save some of that income instead of spend it?
My friend got me keycaps or key switches for keyboards, and I'm pretty excited to use them.
And so businesses will find themselves with unsold products and products piling up in their warehouses. So there's a potential, not always, but there's a potential problem that the flows of money in input markets are not matched by the flows of spending in output markets.
This is basic accounting 101.
Considerable attention to the connections
Left side,
markets and output markets.
assets equal liabilities and owner's equity. Oh shoot, I should have taken a picture of that.
What about the banking system? There are no private banks. There is no central bank. Those are the biggest players who are missing from this model. And of course, there are all the other unnecessary details like weather and default. This is a simplification, and you must always
Imbalances.
model is very useful for business management. But if they are too simple and they do not support the information, then they may not help us understand the problem or tell us something. This is a summary of some of the key points about the circular flow. Input markets determine income, and in input markets, households are selling, businesses are buying. Households determine the value of all products and services, and the role are words in output markets. Output markets, businesses, and households are buying. What we're going to do simply is tackle that. In microeconomics, we focus on the interaction between demand and supply, but in input markets, they both, or in output markets,
Microeconomics, I was actually cooking. Microeconomics and just focusing on the demand and supply in input markets alone or output markets alone. But in macro, you look at the whole thing.
what determines those prices and those customers. What we're going to do in macro is look at connections. Connections is a really important word. The connections between input markets and players involve players. You can see a simple circular flow. Let's start with the role of money, banks, and in micro. For example, when we talk about the market for wheat or the market for coffee, we have talked about the role of money or the role of banks. We have also not talked about the role of expectations. In micro, the only place expectations enter is expected to be price on a particular product or given. Macroeconomics, expectations are going to become a startup.
Expectation. What an interesting word to use, expectation.
In international trade involves exchange rates between currencies. You have all of those details covered. So these macro, we focus on player economics, larger context, broaden the scope of the analysis of macroeconomics versus micro. The last set of players we've been talking
Connections to between Canadian economy and the rest of the world.
is
Government set rules. Government set rule. This is like my VTuber anime voice. Huh, government set. I can't do this while the camera's on. Government set rules of the game and can choose to interact in any aspect of the economy, including policies. I'm pretty good at this voice acting stuff, huh? I'm getting there, you know. It's like a staircase. You take one step at a time.
macroeconomics, government policies, especially fiscal and monetary policies, are going to play a starring role. Why do we do these simplifications? Students sometimes object, and I understand this objection. Say, wait a minute, this is so unrealistic. Is this really going to help me understand the world in which I live? We have to do this as economists because if we are to be scientific in our approach,
Is this echoing? If it's echoing, I might have bricked the whole stream. No, my bad.
we try and isolate the effects of one variable at a time. We have to make simplifications to start before we add.
Hey, I didn't brick the. You can't even hear it. Huh? Yo, how do I sound? How do I... Yo, test, test, how do I sound? Yo, how do I sound? How do I... Test, test, how do I sound? Hold on, hold on. Bro, you can't even hear the desktop audio. I fumbled this whole game, bro. Audio input. Oh my gosh, bro. I did like the vine boom sounds too. Oh, 2026 is not. Oh, but I think it's this way.
Add back in the complications later on. We build these models and make the complications later on. We build these models and make the complications later on. And make the complications later on.
I think I have to wear earbuds. That's fine. Though I'm going to pause here to grab like a snack because like my dopamine is low-key fried. We're still on one. Yeah, I'll be back. Um Hi. All right. Continuing on with
Make
this.
assumptions to
what I
mimic the
made
controlled
was,
experiments
peanut
that scientists
butter,
do
jelly,
in laboratories.
jelly.
Now I have up here Say's law. Supply creates its own demand. Say's law is a very important concept. And as you will see in macroeconomics, the question is it a law? Is it true or not? This simple form of Say's law, supply creates its own demand. You're probably thinking, what does that mean? So let me show you. Professor Colby already talked a bit about this in figure 5.1, but I want to go into a little more detail.
Professor Colby?
In looking at the circular flow, I'm just going to emphasize the parts about supply creating its own demand. Let's start with households. Households up here supply inputs in input markets to businesses, and businesses in exchange pay for those inputs. What do households do with that money? They turn around and demand products and services in output markets that businesses have produced. The logic is, why would you sell things? Why would you supply things to the market unless you wanted the money to in turn demand other things? And that's the idea. Supply implicitly is creating its own demand. The idea behind Say's law is the idea of why markets work well when Adam Smith's invisible hand is operating. Supply in the circular flow turns around and creates equivalent demand, and we end up with coordinated choices among all individuals. Here's where I'd like to take you back to the question about, well, if the invisible hand works so well, how did we get the Great Depression? How did we get the global financial crisis? So again, let me look at the circular flow to tell that story where Say's law doesn't work so well. So households, again, may supply labor in input markets to businesses. Businesses pay for that labor. But what if the households save, they don't buy, and the impact is big enough so that businesses cut back on production? What happens then? Businesses lay off workers, and we've got a problem. Here's where we get back to the question of, well, if the invisible hand works so well, how did we get the Great Depression? How did we get the global financial crisis? That's the question mark. Here is a picture of Ben Bernanke. Ben Bernanke was the chairman of the US Federal Reserve during the global financial crisis. He was formerly an economist, a professor at Princeton University, where he is again now after his term finished at the US Federal Reserve. In his research, he had actually studied extensively the Great Depression and what happened and how things went wrong and the mistakes that governments made. When the global financial crisis hit in 2008, he was determined not to allow the Fed to make the mistakes that had made in the Great Depression. He put it this way, he said, I am not going to preside over the Great Depression 2.0. We'll get to that full story later on in these lectures. From Bernanke's observations of what went on in the Great Depression, he tells a story about what got him interested in macroeconomics. And the story goes something like this. Bernanke grew up in a small factory town in Pennsylvania. And in the midst of the Great Depression, what he observed in his town made absolutely no economic sense to him. So what was that? He observed on the one hand, there were all sorts of poor people who were not working and who could not afford to buy shoes for their children. The factory town was a shoe factory town. So there was a shoe factory sitting idle and not hiring workers. And Bernanke thought to himself, wait a minute. If the shoe factory would just hire the workers, then the workers would earn enough money to be able to buy the shoes that the factory produced. That would be a really good outcome. And yet it didn't happen. Why was that? It seemed so obvious to Bernanke that there must be a solution to this problem, and yet the market did not operate that way. It did not provide an invisible hand solution. The invisible hand simply did not coordinate the choices of the workers, the employers, and everybody else who was involved in that town. Bernanke wanted to see if he could figure out a way to solve this problem. I've symbolized that problem here with the big question mark in the middle of the circular flow diagram. Somehow, the Say's law story of a smooth, continuous circle around the circular flow did not work out. How do you correct that problem? I'm telling you this story not just because it's a story about Ben Bernanke, but because it's a really important story for macroeconomics in general. This is the fundamental question that story motivates. And I want to read you this question because it's going to organize the entire way we think about macroeconomics. So the question goes, if left alone by government, how quickly do the price mechanisms of market economies adjust to maintain steady growth in living standards, full employment, and stable prices? This is a key question. It turns out macroeconomists disagree about the answers. One answer comes from a camp that I'm going to call markets self-adjust, so government hands off. This camp basically believes in Say's law. If you leave markets alone, then supply will create its own demand and the invisible hand will work quite well. The other camp is called markets fail often, so government hands on. This camp is associated with John Maynard Keynes, the inventor of macroeconomics. We're going to be coming back to this question constantly throughout these lectures. But to begin, I want to show you two quick videos about the question, do markets quickly self-adjust in the way that Adam Smith's invisible hand suggests, or do they fail? And in these videos, you're going to meet, for the first time, a couple of the key players in macroeconomics, Friedrich von Hayek and John Maynard Keynes.
60-second adventures in economics. Number 1, the invisible hand. An economy is a tricky thing to control, and governments are always trying to figure out how to do it. Back in 1776, economist Adam Smith shocked everyone by saying that what governments should actually do is just leave people alone to buy and sell freely among themselves. He suggested that if they just leave self-interested traders to compete with one another, markets are guided to positive outcomes as if by an invisible hand. If someone charges less than you, customers will buy from them instead. You have to lower the price.
Next. Say's law claims. Alright, bro. This, okay, this is a specific word. Say's law claims that demand is greater than supply. Supply creates its own demand. Supply is greater than demand. Demand creates its own supply. I think it's this one. Alright. This says supply creates its own demand.
That's the definition of Say's law. All earned income from supplying inputs is spent demanding products and services.
Say's law. Let's Google that one. I wasn't paying attention. All earned income from supplying inputs the simple circular flow model of economic life does not include the role of expectation, the rest of the world, the bank, it's all of them.
Like all models, the circular flow model is a simplification.
Those favoring a government hands-off approach argue that the market will quickly self-adjust if left alone by the government. I mean, it's probably one of these. The hands-off is the invisible hand theory, but I'm gonna just say self-adjust. All right, bro.
No need for government policy, and a belief that government failure is more likely than market failure.
People believe that the governments will fail before the markets will fail. No. People will believe that governments will cause the market to fail, then the market naturally failing. That's why this hands-off approach is in existence. I feel like this stream is a little boring, but you could do your own work. You could put this in the background.
Those two 60-second videos show very different answers to the fundamental macroeconomic question. How quickly do markets self-adjust? Do they self-adjust at all? Or do they need the visible hand of government? What I want to do in this section is give you a little more detail about those two answers to the fundamental macroeconomic question. The hands-off answer and the hands-on answer. Those disagreements that you saw in the video, disagreements between Hayek and Keynes, they persist to this day. Economists disagree far more about macroeconomics than they do about microeconomics. And of course, politicians disagree even more. I'm going to show you also how the economists and the politicians map onto each other. You might be thinking, Now, wait a minute. Isn't there just one answer to the fundamental macroeconomic question? Because the Great Depression happened, the global financial crisis happened, so isn't the hands-on view the only possible answer to that question? Well, it's not that simple. Just because those events happened and markets did fail, that doesn't mean that the only answer to the fundamental macroeconomic question is markets fail often. One of the crucial phrases in the initial part of the question is, if left alone by government. And that is a really crucial assumption. The reason that's a crucial assumption is because it's possible that maybe it's the government that failed as opposed to the market that failed, and that the government, not the market, is the source of the problems. This is an idea called government failure.
Markets failure is when market outcomes are inefficient and fail to serve public interest. Government's failure is government's policies fails to serve the public interest.
That governments fail to serve the public interest, and that the actions that they take actually make things worse instead of better. I've put up here a picture of a book cover that appeared shortly after the global financial crisis. As you can see, it's about the financial crisis, and it's called The Free Market Cure. And look at the quote down below. This is by Charles Koch, one of the Koch brothers, strong supporters of the Republican Party in the United States. And he says the economic crisis was a failure not of the free market, but of government. I'm not saying that this position is right or wrong. I'm just telling you that there is an alternative to the idea that markets fail often and therefore the government should be hands-on. Let me characterize, with a bit of stereotyping, the differences between these two positions. I'll talk about the agreements a little bit later. This is one of the positions that I want to describe. I'm calling it left alone, markets self-adjust, so government hands-off. You can see the icon up here, which is illustrated with a thumbs down for the role of government in a market economy. What are the other characteristics of this position, or this camp of macroeconomists, but also politicians and citizens? You're going to have to make up your own mind about this question. You're going to have to make your own choice, and so I want to give you some details to inform that choice. Part of the position behind the left alone, markets self-adjust camp is that microeconomic outcomes and macroeconomic outcomes are the same. In other words, there is no fallacy of composition. The whole is equal to the sum of the parts. When individuals make smart choices, these turn into smart choices for society as a whole. This is part of the position. Second, external events or government failure are what cause economic problems.
Left alone markets self-adjusts. Government's hands off camp.
Not the market itself. External events can be things like acts of nature, earthquake, pandemics, even things like technological change, which are somewhat outside the purview of economics. A new invention comes along that revolutionizes how we all do business, whether it's electricity in the early 1900s or whether it's artificial intelligence in our own day and age. These new inventions cause all sorts of economic upheaval. And besides external events, including technological change, government actions can also be a source of disruption. So even though we see markets not adjusting quickly, and we see undesirable results like unemployment and inflation, these may not be due to the market itself, to market failure, but to other causes external to markets. It could be, even, government is at fault. The hands-off camp believes that markets adjust quickly to any form of disruption and return to a desirable outcome. When there are problems, it's more likely that it's government failure as opposed to market failure as the source of those problems. So for this camp, if you have to choose who to trust, they're more likely to trust the market than they are to trust government.
Yeah, when I pause it with my mouse, this continues. When I pause it with my space bar, it doesn't. The software is a little outdated, and it does use PHP, so... Okay, I do think governments should play a role. They shouldn't stand still. However, I don't think they should micromanage. I feel like that's where government failure scarce comes in, while market failure, that is a sign of like weak. Like I know.
And then finally, this follows as a logical consequence, government should keep its hands off the economy. So this is one answer to the fundamental macroeconomic question. Governments should keep their hands off the economy because markets will quickly self-adjust and produce invisible hand outcomes. Steady growth in living standards, full employment, and stable prices. Here's the other answer to the fundamental macroeconomic question, the other point of view shared by some macroeconomists, as well as politicians and citizens. So for this camp, the answer to the question, if left alone by government, will markets quickly self-adjust? That answer is no, they will not. In fact, markets fail often and do not produce desirable results. And for that reason, there's an important role for government. In the icon for the hands-on position, you have the thumbs up for the role of government. This camp embraces the fallacy of composition. The whole is not equal to the sum of the parts, and this is where you can get outcomes like the paradox of thrift. So macroeconomic outcomes can be very different from microeconomic outcomes. Even though individuals might be making good, smart, self-interested choices, when combined, those choices do not turn out to be good choices for society as a whole. The key to where markets fail is connection failures. I've highlighted those words, and they're important to pay attention to. The connection failures are between input markets and output markets, and they often involve the role of money, the role of banks, and the role of expectations. I'm going to be telling you stories about those connection failures as we go along. But these connection failures are the same as the ones Ben Bernanke described in the shoe factory in Pennsylvania. Why was it that the shoe factory couldn't simply hire the workers, pay them money, and then the workers would have the ability to buy shoes for their children, and everybody would be better off? Why did that connection failure happen? That's a big macroeconomic problem from the hands-on point of view. Another aspect of this view is that when there are these kinds of
since Columbina is more, I don't know, I like her animations, and I also like how her voice actor is voiced by Mao Mao from Apothecary Diary. That's one of the animes I watched recently and I really liked. So it's like I want to pull for her. Same. So I do think NF's voice actor is pretty cool. How she plays with Flynn's VA and stuff. I do want to pull outside of that. I do only want to really. I want to pull for Mawika, and I also want to pull for
those two, right, and the hands-on.
I want to pull for what's her name, Silali. Mawika, I thought long and hard of this. I have a Claymore that's really good on her, and I don't have any Claymore users. I would consider Varka, but I'm not too sure yet. I'm still thinking, and it's either Varka or him, or her, or Mawika. I really like the transportation aspect though, which is one of the big reasons I want a character, or an ally character. Silali, the reason why I want Silali is because like I lost her 50-50 to freaking Duluk. And then yeah.
There are these kinds of failures. Markets.
So these dudes think that market failure happens faster than government. I disagree. Unless like the government actually know what they're doing, most of the time
failure, and therefore the government should step in and be to left. When you think about the hands-off answer, markets quickly self-adjust, government hands-off, that tends to be associated with the political right, the conservative faction in any country, especially in North America. That would be Republicans in the United States. It would be the Conservative Party here in Canada. This is a free market, government hands-off point of view. The hands-on answer to the question, if left alone by government, markets fail often, and therefore the government should be hands-on, is associated with the liberal political left. Democrats in the United States, liberals, and certainly the NDP here in Canada. You can make similar mappings from these positions to other political parties in countries all around the world. I've tried to exaggerate these differences between the two camps, but I don't want to over-exaggerate them. There are still considerable agreements among economists, even politicians and citizens, on some aspects of how. So everybody has some role for government. The big difference is, in the sense, differ is around run perspective.
Like, delete that. Macroeconomic. So, some role for government setting rules, but differ on how the roles for the fiscal and monetary. So rules, general rules, from prices and but different focuses
Where the
on relative steady growth in market economics in the long run, or focuses on correcting ups and downs. So hands-on, quick fix, hands-off.
Camps differ is in terms of their interest in looking at either short-run business cycles or a longer-run perspective, looking at the overall growth of the economy over time, despite those short-run ups and downs of business cycles. This table is, I hope, a useful summary of these differences in the positions of the hands-off and the hands-on camps around the fundamental macroeconomic question.
So I would say if you have like a little cold, taking Tylenol or something is probably good. But that would be the hands-on. But when it comes to like a sickness, like a, let's just say a bigger issue, I don't know. Maybe you should maybe you should look into more.
I encourage you to have a look at
options
it and certainly
resolution.
use it for review
I'm
purposes.
assuming.
You can see the different issues. On the fallacy of composition, the hands-off point of view is that of the hands-on economic internal, and the
So
hands
is this
question,
mentioning
macro,
the
that question.
differences? I could do the which political party supports the hands-off approach by the government? It's obviously the Bloc Québécois. I'm kidding.
Hands-off is usually associated.
There is government failure when markets are slow to adjust. Government policies serve the public interest. Policymakers are captured by special interest groups. Economists. I don't know. Government failure is when government policies fail to serve the public interest. Did they write this wrong? There is government's failure when markets are slow to adjust. Well, that's just a part of the hands-on campaign where markets are slow to adjust. But that doesn't mean there's government failure. Policymakers are captured by special interest groups. Economics lie to politicians. I mean, sure. It's either three or four. Why did I guess?
Government failure occurs when government policy fails to serve the public interest. This can occur when policymakers are captured by special interest groups.
Okay, that makes more sense in retrospect, but the way that question was worded kind of confused me. Macro outcomes.
The outcomes by which we judge macroeconomic performance are contained in the fundamental question and are highlighted in red.
Switches.
Steady growth in living
low-key have
standards,
ADHD
full employment,
now.
and stable prices. I want to introduce these outcomes, which we will need to measure if we are to answer the question, well, how well do markets perform? For all the various outcomes that might occur, we're going to judge performance by looking at real-world data. There are three main outcomes. One is gross domestic product, which we're going to spend a lot of time talking about in future units. And the more gross domestic product there is, the more stuff there is, the better our standards of living. Lower unemployment is another desirable outcome for obvious reasons. And low and predictable inflation. Again, a topic that will require a lot of explanation coming shortly. This is the homepage of Statistics Canada, the main governmental agency responsible for measuring statistics about Canada, especially the Canadian economy. And you can see the importance of these three outcomes, GDP, unemployment, and inflation, by their prominent position on this homepage. Let me just point these out to you. So down here at the bottom, we have real GDP, connected to living standards. Above that, we have the unemployment rate. And above that, we have the consumer price index, which is used to measure the inflation rate. And the other variable that's here on the homepage is the population, because all of these variables, especially GDP, don't make a lot of sense unless you look at what is the amount of stuff the economy produces per person. Again, all of this to be explained in much more detail shortly. So those are the outcomes. Let's now have a look at the players that produce those outcomes. You can see the first set of players up here, consumers. This would be consumers or households. We're going to use those terms interchangeably. Although we're looking at the choices of consumers, we're going to be looking at a limited number of choices. One fundamental choice is, what do you do with your income? Do you spend it or do you save it? That's a crucial macroeconomic question. Another choice is, do you buy products and services in Canada, or do you buy imported products and services? There are many other choices that consumers make that are not relevant for macroeconomics. For example, do you buy your groceries at Loblaws, or do you buy your groceries at Metro? Do you get your hair cut at an expensive salon or at a bargain basement shop? Those kinds of choices don't make much difference from a macroeconomic point of view, and we're not going to focus on them. Businesses are the second set of players. One of the very crucial business choices, which gets its own word, is business investment spending. In macroeconomics, when we talk about business investment spending, we're talking about building new factories or buying new equipment. We're not talking about stocks and bonds. That's very important to keep straight. Otherwise, it can lead to a lot of confusion. So business investment spending is on new factories and new equipment. Another obvious, I hope, business choice is the decision about hiring workers or not. Think back to the shoe factory in Pennsylvania in Ben Bernanke's story. Did the factory hire workers or did it not? That decision had many macroeconomic consequences. Another business choice for macroeconomics is domestic versus international. When you are buying inputs, do you buy them domestically or do you buy them internationally? Similarly, when you are selling as a business, are you selling domestically or are you selling to the rest of the world and exporting the products and services you produce? One of the business choices that's not important for macroeconomics is, for example, do you produce black jeans or do you produce blue jeans? That choice doesn't make any difference from a macroeconomic perspective, and so we're not going to look at those kinds of business choices. For macroeconomics, the government is also an obviously important player. What are the important government choices for macroeconomics? First of all, governments buy a lot of stuff. They build roads, they hire a lot of accountants. Those kinds of choices have macroeconomic consequences. Governments also can choose to interact with the economy from a policy point of view. Fiscal policy is where the government makes purchases or changes taxes and transfers with the intent of trying to improve the macroeconomic outcomes of steady growth in living standards, full employment, and stable prices. Another key set of players, and this was clearly not in microeconomics, consists of the banking system, both the private banks and the government central bank, the Bank of Canada. What is the importance of the banking system? Well, one of the most important things that banks do is to make loans, and they can choose. Am I going to make a loan to this business or individual, or am I not? And in the aggregate, that has a big impact in macroeconomics. The Bank of Canada's role as a player has to do with monetary policy, which will be a subject of an entire chapter in future lectures. And the final player is the rest of the world, which economists abbreviate as ROW. If we're focusing on the Canadian economy to start, the way that we integrate the rest of the world is to say, okay, as a player, does the rest of the world buy Canadian exports, or do they buy domestically or from some other country? And is the rest of the world selling what they produce to Canada or selling it somewhere else? The other thing that the rest of the world does by way of economic choices is investing money. Countries outside of Canada can choose to invest in Canada, and similarly, Canadians can choose to invest in the rest of the world or not. All of these choices affect macroeconomic performance here in Canada.
The performance of the Canadian economy is measured by the key outcomes. Yeah, all of them.
These are the three key performance outcomes in the fundamental macroeconomic question.
GDP, unemployment, when businesses buy new factories and equipment, this is called investment spending.
Business investment spending is different from financial investments in stocks or bonds. Finally, for this introductory chapter on macroeconomics, I'd like to make this a little more personal. Why should you care about macroeconomics? What's in it for you? Your personal economic success is going to be affected by these performance outcomes. GDP, gross domestic product. The more GDP an economy produces, the higher your standard of living as well as others' standard of living. Unemployment. Well, that's going to affect your chances of finding a job and your bargaining position when you finally do get hired by an employer. Inflation, which has to do with how fast do prices rise. This is really important for your personal standard of living because if prices are rising faster than your income is rising, then your standard of living is falling. So you can't judge your standard of living without knowing something about.
All right, so they give me questions on the next chapter. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Inflation, about what's happening to average.
Okay. So your personal economic success. 1. GDP. I don't really know what GDP is, but people always throw it around, so I'm gonna Google it. GDP meaning. GDP, short for gross domestic product. That doesn't really help. The total value of everything a country produces, goods and services within its borders over a specific time, like a year or a quarter. Higher per person allows higher living standards. Unemployment. Unemployment. Did you just say the U slur? Look at here, bro. You are gonna get canceled. You're gonna get canceled, man. Yo, what just happened? Inflation reduces living standard. What? Inflation reduces living standard if income does. Oh, okay, yeah. That makes sense.
Prices in the economy. Inflation is an
inflation's
especially
terrible
important
here.
problem for people who are older who live on fixed incomes like pensions or CPP. Maybe your parents, maybe your grandparents. When prices go up and those pensions do not, standards of living fall. These are a few of the very personal effects that macroeconomic outcomes will have on your life. There's one last outcome which we did not include in the fundamental macroeconomic question, and that is interest rates, exchange rates, and government taxes. Interest rates will affect how expensive a mortgage is, whether you can afford car payments. Exchange rates have to do with how much the Canadian dollar exchanges for in terms of other currencies, and that's going to affect how affordable will it be to go on vacation in Portugal, or what will be the cost of the chocolate that you import from Colombia. And government taxes and transfers, I think, are obvious in terms of their impact on your own personal standard of living. Besides these personal impacts of macroeconomic outcomes, it's really important to understand macroeconomics because you're going to be making choices as a citizen between political parties, between politicians who are going to ask for your vote and who will support very different government economic policies. Depending on who gets elected and which policies get put into place, they're going to have significant impact on you, on your life, on your standard of living. The better you understand the consequences of different policies, the smarter the choices you can make about which policies and which politicians to support. In thinking like an economist, which is what I'm hoping to help you learn how to do, the circular flow model is going to continue to be really important. The circular flow model highlights the connections between input markets and output markets. And those connections are often the source of where the markets fail or where they succeed. So being able to focus on these most important points within the economy will help you better understand what's going on and make better choices in terms of policies to support. We're going to be coming back extensively to the circular flow model, and we're going to be building on it. I talked about the many things that were excluded in this simple version. We're going to be adding those back in. International trade, the rest of the world, the banking system, government taxes, all of those features we will incorporate slowly so that you have a chance to digest them as we expand the circular flow model to better capture all that goes on in the Canadian economy in an international context. One of the best people to describe what it means to think like a macroeconomist is John Maynard Keynes, the inventor of modern macroeconomics. This is a sketch of Keynes, but I want you to pay attention to his words. Notice what he's saying. He's saying economics does not give you definitive answers to questions. It is instead a method rather than a doctrine, an apparatus of the mind, a technique of thinking which helps its possessor draw correct conclusions. That's what I want to do. I want to try and help you to learn how to think analytically and critically in evaluating macroeconomics. Keynes had much more to say about what it means to think like an economist. I put up this quote in previous units. Economics is a science of thinking in terms of models, joined to the art of choosing models which are relevant to the contemporary world. This is a quote that I not only have in previous units, but also it appears on all of my course outlines for any course that I teach. In other words, I think it's really important. Here's the rest of the quote. Economics operates in this way because unlike the natural sciences, we can't perform controlled experiments. The material to which economic thinking is applied is not homogeneous through time. The world changes day to day, minute to minute. So you can't presume that all other things are unchanged. You can't mimic the controlled experiment of a laboratory, or at least you can't do.
John Mayer's, I feel like this is going to be like a test question. John Maynard. This dude's middle name is Maynards. That's minus aura. Economics is a science of thinking in terms of models joined to the art of choosing models which are relevant to the contemporary world. It is compelling to be this because unlike the typical nature of science, the materials to which it is applied is in too many respects not homogeneous through time. The object of a model is to segregate the semi-permanent or relevant constant factors from which these are transitory or fluctuating, so as to develop a logical way of thinking. Okay, my tonality is pretty bad. It's pretty bad right now. But this dude is saying the most randomest words. Why is he saying segregate and semi-permanent? Like just say join or not always. This dude's trying to sound so smart, bro. This dude's trying to sound so smart.
Do it very easily. Because the world is changing all the time and we can't control that,
Because the
economists
world
have
is
to build
changing all the
models. We
time,
have to make
economics
assumptions
have to
that
build
mimic
models.
controlled experiments
We
and
have
try
to
and
make
hold constant the
assumptions
less
then.
important variables so that we can focus on the variables that
It's at
really help us
1.5x
understand
speed,
how the
so I
economy
can't read that
functions.
fast.
And with that understanding comes the ability to choose the models that are relevant for understanding the contemporary world. I want to end with what I hope you will be at the end of this macroeconomics course. This cartoon represents, to me, what it means to think like an economist. If you look at these scientists, on the left, you have the chemist who's working with reagents in a laboratory. On the right,
He
you
is
have
a
biologists who
thought
are using
experiment.
microscopes and other laboratory equipment to establish what's going on. And in the middle, you
The
have this guy,
thinker
and the other
is
scientists are saying
always
his
thinking.
is a thought experiment. Well, that guy is the economist. He can't perform controlled experiments, and so instead he has to build models. Thought experiments are a different way of saying building models.
Yo,
And if we do our job
computer
well, then
science, we
you're going to
also
be able
build
to think
models,
like an
but we
economist.
build AI models. I didn't even thinking. Okay, hold on. Let me write this down. What is this? Thinking like a macroeconomist is focusing on expectations and the Canadian economy. 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 Reading the word economy is such a weird word. All of the other answers. Input, market, input markets and output markets. The banking system, it's all of them. Because you need to look at the interest rates. You also need to look at the input and output markets, and you also have to look at the expectations. What he mentioned earlier.
Connections between.
Now, this is our knowledge check. Oh, wait, what? This one is specialized groups.
There is government.
View energy. Yeah, that's fine. I already wrote this all down, so it's not my. No, it's not my problem. Up around the circular flow, measure GDP and standard living. You may now close this content window. Cinema. We finished. Well, let me check my. These are my notes so far. They're not the best, and what I'm going to do after, probably not right now because I'm pretty bored. Probably do this during the tutorial or something like that. Let me switch my. Okay. What's basically going on is I wrote each section that was on the left hand side of the screen, and I wrote basic definitions. I wrote I use basic images that are important so I can remember. I make basic notes. Basic notes like the input market, imbalances can break the market, pretty simple stuff. And then all the quizzes at the end, I would put that also in there. And then that's really it. That's really it. So, I'm gonna turn this off right now. I'm gonna check my. Oh. All right. So, probably do that later. All right, that's really all I wanted to stream today. This was an hour and 20-minute stream. Thank you. Oopsies. I don't have like a Thank you for coming to the stream. Thank you for putting me as your background noise. Thank you. Thank you. I I have a problem. Well, thank you for coming. Hopefully, the next time I stream, it's Genshin because I actually been wanting to stream that, but there isn't much I can stream. All I've been doing off of Genshin was all I've been doing outside of Genshin or in Genshin is like spend my resin on ley lines or boss materials, and then I'd log off. Like I got to see my gold Libin again, but that's like 3 clicks and you're done. I also did the Durin quest off stream because I wanted to do it before the quest thingy ended, and I didn't want to spend. I wanted to skin. It was just like knocking two birds with one stone. That's what I wanted to do. After all of that, though, I'm just building pre-farming for Columbina because I can guarantee a Columbina even though I don't want to. I want to win the 50-50 for once. Like, oh, but yeah, hopefully I get Columbina early because I want to pull for Mawika or Varka. It's either or. And I also want to pull for Sitlali. I also want to pull for Nicole. That's really it. Thank you for coming to my stream and